What is up, everybody, and welcome to my top 50 action movies of all time. If you missed it, a couple of weeks ago I dropped my top 50 comedies of all time. Here in a couple of weeks I'm going to drop my top 50 horror films of all time, and then wrap this whole monstrosity up with my top 100 movies of all time. But I'm not doing this crazy shit alone. Brian Lomax from Brian Lomax Movie Talk is also going to be dropping a list the exact same second that you see this one. So once you're done with this massive list, go check out his. Our comedy list could not have differed more. I think our action list is going to line up a lot more. So go over there, see what his favorite picks are, leave him a comment, say that Cody sent you if you're not already one of his awesome subscribers, and then let me know down below what you think of this list. Now, just like with the top 50 comedies, I'm not going to be giving commentary on every single one of these. I've talked about a lot of them ad nauseum. So there's a lot of them here that I'm just going to kind of montage through. I'm going to talk about ones that I feel like there's something I want to say, or it's a movie I've never talked about on this channel before. So you'll see me sporadically until I get to the top 15, and then I'll talk about all of those. Also, as a small little PSA, I've never really been into martial arts cinema. Maybe I'm missing a lot. Maybe one day I'll get there. It's just a genre that I've never really had a whole lot of interest in. So you're not going to see any of those movies on this list. I know that's going to be sacrilege to some of you, but letting you know now, you're not going to see any Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or the Raid movies on here. I've just never seen them, so can't get any more honest than that. Also, this is the list where I'm going to be putting all of my favorite comic book films as well. It's not going to be comic book heavy, but the top tier comic book films that I think are the best will be home on this list. There's a couple of them you could probably argue would be just as at home on a comedy list, but I always think action first with comic book films, so there you go. They're going to be here. This is my top 50 action films of all time. Number 50 is actually going to be a remake, and it might be the only remake on this list now that I think about it, and that's Assault on Precinct 13. This was a movie that came out of absolutely nowhere for me. At the time, I had not seen the John Carpenter original. I didn't even realize it was a remake when I went to see it. I just thought the trailer looked badass. Me and my dad went to go check it out, and it's a very action-heavy, thrilling movie that I actually think is a remake that betters the original. I know I had that controversial opinion a lot, but this is one of those movies that I do think that. You have Lawrence Fishburne as this career criminal. You have Ethan Hawke as the head of this little precinct that's getting ready to be dismantled and tossed away in Detroit. And one night on New Year's Eve, whenever there's not supposed to be hardly any security there, all of Lawrence Fishburne's dirty cop compadres are trying to bust into this precinct to break him out. And the criminals and the cops have to team up to be a part of this siege, basically, to fend off all these dirty cops and survive the night. And it's just a badass movie. It's got great characters. It's got great lines. The chemistry between Ethan Hawke and Lawrence Fishburne as kind of antagonists that kind of have to become friends by the end of it is awesome. Even Gabriel Byrne as the villain is great. There's some unexpected deaths throughout the movie that you're like, oh, I would have expected that person to live to the end, but I guess not. It's a badass movie with some great action, some great gunplay, and I think it is a damn good remake. So coming in at number 50, definitely check out the remake of Assault on Precinct 13. Number 43 is a great action thriller that is severely not talked about in this movie community, and that is The Edge. This is a badass survival action thriller with Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin and a couple other actors that you will recognize, where Anthony Hopkins is basically this rich guy who is taking all these people onto this little Alaskan trip. I believe it was in Alaska. Their plane crashes, so him and 3 or 4 other people in his group are now stranded in the wilderness, and there is a man-eating bear after them the entire time. So it's a great movie that has these thrilling kind of horror action aspects where they're trying to fend off the bear or set traps for the bear. But one of my favorite aspects of this movie is Anthony Hopkins is a rich guy, but he's very smart. He's a genius, and he knows all these little tricks to survive in the wilderness. So throughout the movie, they'll have problems like we need water or we need this, and he'll have these little knowledge inside of him of how to do it with just the elements around him. And it's just a very cool, interesting movie for that aspect alone. But the bear sequences are thrilling, they're terrifying. When it gets to the point where him and Alec Baldwin have had enough and they're just done with this shit and they're gonna kill this fucking bear, that is just a badass part of the movie where it's all action, it's all setting traps. It's kind of like the third act of Predator in a way where they're gonna use the wilderness against the bear. It is a kick-ass movie, so not a whole lot of people talk about it. I had to throw it on this list. Maybe more thriller than action, but some of the action sequences here is awesome. Check out The Edge.
Got to say Simon Says.
Number 36 is Enemy of the State, one of, if not my favorite Tony Scott film aside from True Romance. That one's defaulted at the top. But Enemy of the State is probably one of the most underappreciated Will Smith movies. Everybody always talks about Bad Boys, and I'll be talking about that here too. Everybody always talks about Independence Day and, you know, some of these big, huge blockbusters, but Enemy of the State is one of his best movies. It's all about government control and government invasiveness through technology, kind of like that whole Edward Snowden thing that he whistleblowed about them being able to log into your computer or, you know, putting cameras through your house or tapping your phone without you knowing. It's all about that, but it's told through an action thriller scope. So it's not so much about like a political side of things. You get this everyday guy played by Will Smith that gets caught up in this plot where the senator is murdered by the government. There's a tape out there, he accidentally gets a hold of it, and for the rest of the movie it's the government versus him, where they're canceling his credit cards and they're posting stories about him to get the cops to zone in on him, and every time he uses a phone call they're in him on seconds. And he teams up with Gene Hackman, who is kind of a disavowed government agent that knows about all this shit and tries to take on the government himself. And it's just a badass movie. It's got great action sequences, it's a great thriller. Will Smith is at his best in this. Tony Scott, I mean, the guy was always awesome at filming action sequences like this, like little like gritty, realistic action sequences. And it's just a great thriller. It's a great movie that nobody ever talks about with Will Smith. As you guys saw on my comedy list, I like kind of premiering movies that are more underrated and underappreciated more than I do the ones that everybody talks about. This is one of those movies. If you're a Will Smith fan and you've never seen Enemy of the State, shame on you. Change that today.
Now back up, put the gun down, and give me a pack of tropical fruit bubblicious. Go!
these next couple of movies I'm going to talk about because these are ones that I definitely want to discuss. Number 29 is Speed. This is a great classic Keanu Reeves movie. It was very important to me growing up. I remember having the VHS tape, and we went to Media Play, for those of us that even remember what the hell that retail store was, and I remember us getting a poster, and I hung the poster on my wall. It's a very nostalgic movie for me that I still think holds up pretty damn well. I hate the sequence where the bus jumps over the gap. I think it looks ridiculous. You could tell something lifts the bus up, but aside from that, and the movie does relish in the over-the-top sense of it, as far as like Die Hard ripoffs, like we had Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a bus, and Die Hard on a boat, this is the best of them by a landslide, by a country mile. This is the best Die Hard on a something movie. And you have this situation where Keanu Reeves is this hard-nosed, young, on-the-rise cop that stops Dennis Hopper from this big terrorist plot that he had in the beginning of the movie with Jeff Daniels, excuse me. And then he comes back for revenge and puts Keanu Reeves in a situation where he has to stay on this bus and keep the bus going above 50 miles per hour. If it drops below it, the bus fucking explodes and everybody dies. And it's just a very cool, exciting, thrilling movie that's just the right amount of over the top. Keanu Reeves showing that early action awesomeness that he has, that gravitas, that badassness that he has as an action hero throughout his career. Dennis Hopper plays a great villain. Even Jeff Daniels is a really good side character with really good comedic chemistry with Keanu Reeves as like the bickering partner. And then you have Sandra Bullock in here too. I don't know if this was her first kind of big movie. I know this kind of helped launch her career to a certain degree, but her chemistry with Keanu Reeves is great. She's cute, she's adorable like she always was. This is a movie that's just a blast. It's held up well, always love checking it out, and it's very nostalgic for me.
Pop quiz. You have a hair trigger aimed at your head. What do you do? What do you do?
28 is Kick-Ass. This is another comic book film that came out of nowhere. Comic book movies weren't quite the craze that they were back when this first movie came out. They were certainly picking up some steam, but Kick-Ass was one of the first comic book movies that felt like they were made for me. The comedy, the action, the whole concept of it. I went and saw this, and if Inception had not come out the year that this did, this would have been my favorite movie of the year. You have this whole concept of a kid in high school that just wants to be a superhero because he seems badass, so he makes his own costume, starts patrolling crime, and kind of starts a movement to a degree, which is explored much more in the sequel, which is not as good, but it's definitely better than people give it credit for. And then you have Nicolas Cage, of all people, playing like a play on Batman. You get introduced to Chloe Grace Moretz in this movie, and she's awesome as this foul-mouthed little girl. And then you have basically this birth of the superhero, and just the comedy especially is on point with this, but there is some badass action sequences, which I did not expect. Matthew Vaughn, man, is just like a master at this type of movie. And whenever you get into the second and third act, when things start to really get crazy and, you know, there's whole criminal empires coming down on Kick-Ass and Big Daddy and Hit Girl, and this is a badass movie. I say the word badass a lot in this list because action's a badass genre, and comic book movies are badass, and this is a badass entry into both of those subgenres. So Kick-Ass, I don't know who hasn't seen it, but if you're one of them, check it out. And number 27 is Dread. This is one of those movies in my life that I had no interest in, no faith in, no fucks to give. Finally gave it a shot when I was bored, and it instantly became one of my favorite movies of all time. And still to this day, I'm pained and pissed that we did not get a follow-up, because it seemed the rest of the collective world gave no fucks about it either, and nobody went to see it in the theaters. But this is a character that I never had really much interest in or faith in, never really had a whole lot of nostalgia or anything for the Sylvester Stallone version, never read the comic books. But this character in this movie being fully realized by Carl Urban, and definitely in a take of The Raid, which I've heard it get compared to a lot of times, where he is just brought into this Peachtree's apartment complex that is, as you get higher, the more crime there is, and him and his new recruit have to just take them all out. And you get the gun that has all these different little gadgets in it and different ammunition that he uses. The fact that he keeps the helmet on the whole time, and his voice, I am the law.
Mama is not the law. I am the law.
This is even one of the movies that have utilized 3D better than pretty much every other movie that has utilized 3D. It utilized 3D as a part of the story with this slow-mo drug, and the effect that it uses is just awesome. Great villain, great pacing. It is a unsung, awesome entry into both the comic book and the action genre that the days may have already passed, they may be dead and buried, but I will always hold on to a little bit of faith that somebody will pick this thing up, Carl Urban will come back, and we'll get a follow-up to Dread. Number 20 is Fast 5. Now, Fast and Furious is one of those franchises that has just weirdly taken on a new life. I mean, if you had told me back when the first one came out that this is eventually going to be one of, if not the biggest action franchise out there as far as gross and popularity, I'd have been like, bitch, you're high. This is a Point Break ripoff that is entertaining. It is entertaining, but it's not going to be much more than that. Ha! You introduce The Rock into any franchise, and man, does that get a shot of testosterone in the arm. Fast 5 is by far the best in this franchise to me. They get bigger, they get crazier as they go along, and some people, like, the more that it gets crazy, the more that they like it. Fast 5 was the perfect mix to me, where there was certainly some over-the-top sense about it, but it still felt very gritty and grounded. And I'm carefully using this word, but a little more realistic than things have gotten. And this whole rivalry that started with Vin Diesel and The Rock when he's hunting them down, bringing back all of the characters from the franchise into this one big movie, even small references to the original movie for those of us that have been around since that one. The action sequences, I mean, we are talking about action movies here, are fucking mind-blowing. This is just an awesome entry into the Fast and the Furious franchise that, to me, pretty much got everything right. There's very little negative that I have to say about this movie. When I want a movie like this, Fast 5 has everything that I want, where some of the sequels before and after Fast 5 dipped a little bit in quality for me or went a little bit too crazy and it just takes me out of it. This is the perfect Fast and Furious movie.
Do you think this is the real Quaid? It is.
A good death is its own reward.
Now we're at the top 15. Some of these movies I have talked about a lot, and I've talked about a lot this year, so I'm going to skate through some of them, but I'm going to mention a little bit about every single one. So number 15 for me is The Matrix. This is a movie that blew minds when it came out. It literally reinvented the sci-fi and the action genre. There was parodies galore because it was so influential. Just a wild story about people injecting themselves into technology, and the slow-mo and the bullet dodging effects that they were able to come up with. This was just unheard of. It was just ahead of its time, and it's something that we still see utilized in action movies today. So it's one of the most influential and still despite some pretty shitty sequels, an action-heavy, thrilling movie that has aged pretty damn well. Number 14 is going to be Breakdown. Now again, this kind of toes the line like The Edge with thriller and action, but there's a lot of great action sequences in here too. You got Kurt Russell and his wife going across country, their car breaks down, somebody offers to give her a ride to the phone closest to them, and so ensues this kidnapping plot that Kurt Russell finds himself in, and he has to turn the tables and kick ass against these kidnappers to get his wife back and to save his own life. And it's just a thrilling, badass masterpiece of an action thriller. To me, this is, I mean, aside from The Thing, probably my favorite Kurt Russell movie. I love it that much. It's something that I've always loved even as a kid. I remember seeing it in theaters. It's just a movie that has a great pace. It goes along at a nice clip. There's enough thrills and mystery there where every time you watch it, you're still kind of not necessarily surprised, but you're really along for the ride of him trying to figure out what the hell happened to his wife. And then as things start to be put into place and he realizes that these people are all in on it, it's just a kick-ass thrill ride of a movie. If you haven't seen it, it's one of Kurt Russell's best. Number 13, Goldeneye, bitch. Yes, there's a lot of this that is attributed to me being a fanatic of the game on N64, so I always wanted to watch the movie when I wasn't playing the game. I was obsessed with Goldeneye as a kid, and it's still one of my favorite Bond movies, by far. Martin Campbell is an awesome action director. He's got multiple movies on this list, and he is a guy that I just think knew exactly what we needed from James Bond at the time. Pierce Brosnan, for all intents and purposes, was my Bond growing up. That was the one that, the actor that kind of embodied Bond in my generation. I still have yet to see a lot of the older Bond movies. I'm going to try my best to rectify that before the new one comes out and do some big-ass ranking, if time allows. But Goldeneye has always been one that has enough of the classic Bond, some of the classic campiness and cheesiness, but awesome action sequences, a great plot, a great story with him and the rivalry with 006, a good villain, a great Bond girl, paced wonderfully, a companion piece of the game that has just been a cultural phenomenon for video games. This movie has pretty much everything that you would want from a Bond movie, and I still love it. But just above that, by a razor-thin difference, is Casino Royale. Now, this was a movie that, again, I had little to no interest in, not a whole lot of faith in. When Daniel Craig was cast as Bond, you might as well have cast like a complete unknown actor that everybody hated at the time because they were like, what the fuck? Bond can't be blonde. Bond can't be this guy. This is gonna suck. And then Casino Royale came out and everybody was like, oh, this is the shit. Yes, I want more of him, please. And it was just one of those ultimate movie moments where everybody was silenced. I wasn't necessarily in the camp that did not want Daniel Craig. I was like, whatever. Never been a big Bond guy. Finally saw the movie, and this is just like action set piece after action set piece after action set piece. And again, directed by Martin Campbell. He comes back from Goldeneye, makes something that, in my opinion, is even better and even more iconic. A great storyline, classic Bond with this casino, poker game that he has to get into and win to foil the terrorist plots all throughout the way they're trying to kill him. And he's got this relationship building with Vesper Lynn and how that all kind of ties together with the classic Bond lore about why he's just a man whore now and doesn't love anybody. And it's just awesome. It is the perfect Bond movie, in my opinion. Whatever movie comes out, even if it's not No Time to Die, whatever Bond movie comes out from today forth is always going to be measured against Casino Royale and Goldeneye for me. Number 11 is going to be Tango and Cash. You got Sylvester Stallone, you got Kurt Russell as rivaling cops, then they're pushed together in this plot where the big crime guy, who is played by Jack Palance, is trying to take both of them out. They had to work together to take Jack Palance out. It is an awesome movie. It's probably my favorite buddy cop movie just because of the humor involved with these two characters. Of course, you gotta love Sly. I mean, him and Arnold are probably the top two action heroes. Gotta love Kurt Russell. And putting them two together, they're just a very fun duo. Two different personalities that clash together, and there's great action sequences. You get all that 80s cheese that's just the right amount in here. It's not too corny, it's not too over the top, it's just right. It's a blast. It's an absolute fun movie that has just as many laughs as it does big explosions. So Tango and Cash, hell yes, number 11. Number 10 is Die Hard with a Vengeance. Yes, this is an awesome sequel that I cherish and I love. Not quite as good as the original, but it's by far the closest of all the Die Hard movies, and there's some pretty damn good movies in that franchise. Die Hard with a Vengeance has this great idea of kind of twisting this terroristic plot on its head and having them have to go out and solve these little riddles, these Simon Says riddles, and then you pair John McClane, who is just as awesome as the first movie as a character in my opinion, with Samuel L. Jackson in Zeus. And those two guys have some of the greatest chemistry in a cop action movie that I've ever seen. They are just riffing off of each other. I still say to this day, if they were ever going to make a great like final Die Hard movie with Bruce Willis, you should bring back Samuel L. Jackson and bring that chemistry back. I think that that is the golden ticket to making another great Die Hard movie because it was just on fire here. I love the villain in Simon and his ties to Hans Gruber and that whole mystery that's kind of unfolded throughout the movie. Does peter out in the last 10 minutes or so, does not have the greatest conclusion in the world, which is why it's not like top 3 for me. The rest of the movie though, holy shit, some of the best ever. Number 9 is my favorite adventure with Ethan Hunt so far, and that is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. A lot of people have Fallout as their favorite, and over time maybe it will overtake this. Obviously you've seen Fallout on this list, it is awesome. Ghost Protocol to me kind of hits all the marks though. Where Fallout was missing a little bit of the humor, and I didn't enjoy the team itself as much, Ghost Protocol hits the action, it hits the comedy, it hits the team dynamic. There's enough mystery in there with the identity of Jeremy Renner. Villain, not necessarily the greatest, but it's not necessarily a movie that focuses on the villain either. It's more so about the journey of the team. Just from the opening of him breaking out of prison to that gigantic skyscraper sequence that is still probably the best sequence in this franchise. This is one of my favorite spy movies, and it is my favorite Mission Impossible movie. Number 8, currently my favorite comic book movie, and it's gonna take a hell of a punch to knock this thing out of number 1, and that is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. To me, this was a movie that I knew was gonna be good. I love the character of Captain America, really enjoyed the first movie. I have it a lot higher in my ranking than most people. But I did not expect this to be as fucking badass as it was. When you walk into the theater and you're like, okay, a cool modern Captain America movie, and then you see the action sequences that this movie is able to pull off over and over and over again, from that like ship siege in the beginning to the elevator sequence, which is still one of my favorite action scenes of all time, all the way through to the third act. I mean, this is a movie that just has everything. It has action, it has heart, it has great side characters that complement Captain America and don't feel like a forced romance with him and Black Widow. They feel like partners and friends. Even the introduction of Sam, aka Falcon, forgot his name for a second there. They're awesome, and they add everything to his character into this movie. Then you get into the villain with Robert Redford, and it's this whole 70s spy thriller aspect, which is right around the time when Marvel started to play with subgenres, and their movies weren't just like comic book movies. It was a heist thriller that's a comic book movie, or a spy thriller that's a comic book movie, and this was one of the best as far as mashing genres together. I love the impact that it has on the overall MCU with the revelation of Hydra being inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. Everything about this movie is awesome. I have very little, if not nothing negative to say about it, and it is my favorite comic book movie of all time as of right now. Number 7 is The Long Kiss Goodnight. This is absolutely one of my favorite movies, period, of all time, and it's one that I barely ever hear anybody talk about. It's kind of like the Bourne Identity before the Bourne franchise was even a thing. I don't know which one came first, because I know there was a novel with Bourne, but The Long Kiss Goodnight in movie form did it first, and it is badass. You got early Shane Black writing, which he's one of my favorite writers and directors of all time. You've got Rennie Harlan, who is so good at doing these types of movies with that over-the-top, frenetic style where he just throws everything at the wall and most things stick in The Long Kiss Goodnight. You got Gina Davis playing this teacher with amnesia that suddenly is thrown into this plot where she realizes that the past that she has left behind her and forgotten about, she was a badass killer assassin, and you pair her with Samuel L. Jackson, who is a private investigator trying to help her unearth her past. And man, when you put Shane Black dialogue coming out of Samuel L. Jackson's mouth, there is no greater synergy in Hollywood. I'm sorry, it has yet to be topped. Gina Davis totally pulls off this role. It's one of the only physical action roles that you're gonna see her play, and she does it flawlessly. I wish we could have seen more with her. God, I love this movie. If you love the Bourne franchise and that type of storyline, that amnesiac assassin type of setup, for me, for my money, The Long Kiss Goodnight is the best of all of them. Number 6 is gonna be First Blood. Now, I always kind of have a little bit of a difficulty putting this in an action list, just like I did with the Action 31 on 31, but Rambo is easily an action franchise, so this is more of a drama. It's a little bit more of a psychological character study, but there's plenty of action scenes to merit it being on this list, and it is by far my favorite Rambo movie, one of my favorite Stallone movies as well, because of that side of things, where it is introspective on the character of Rambo and the post-Vietnam mental state and how this character is, you know, trying to survive in a civilian world and just has no place for it. And they play with that throughout the franchise. But for me, for my money, First Blood is by far the best. Just putting him against this small town sheriff played by Brian Dennehy, rest in peace, and just putting him against that sheriff office and putting them in the elements where they're coming after him in the woods and he takes all of them out in like 5 seconds, and the explosive third act whenever he takes the war to them in their own city. It's just an absolute classic. One of my favorites, had to be on this list, and it made it up here. Number 5, another default to the top, is Aliens. A lot of the ones up at the top here are gonna be those movies that everybody talks about for the most part, but Aliens is one of those that a lot of people consider it more sci-fi and horror. This one to me has always been more action focused. Yes, the sci-fi is still there, prominent. Yes, the horror is still there, prominent, but this is an action-heavy sequel. It's oftentimes debated which one is better, Alien for that psychological slasher in space, or Aliens for that war movie that's got xenomorphs running around. Aliens has always been my favorite of the franchise. It's the one that I watched the most. You got Ripley, who is just enhanced as a character, and this whole like motherhood theme that's going throughout the movie all the way through to the final battle with the Queen Alien, which is one of the most badass sequences in history. And even all the side characters, all the Marine characters, Michael Biehn, Bill Paxton, they are so memorable and so iconic. And it's a movie that's endlessly rewatchable. If you're a fan of the Alien franchise, to me, I don't really understand the debate. As much as I can respect Aliens to me has always been the knockout punch that this series delivered, and I don't think it's ever gonna come close to matching it. Aliens, number 5. Number 4, dude, is Point Break. This is a movie that I got introduced to way too late in life. It's one that my parents always loved and watched. It's one that my dad always championed, but there was a few of those movies that I just never sat down and watched. And I remember specifically the day that I was introduced to Point Break. I was 18 years old, I was in college by myself, I was spending my money on Blu-rays when I should have been saving them for food or other, you know, essential things. What am I talking about? Blu-rays are essential. And I saw that Point Break was gonna have a Blu-ray release. I'm like, I remember Dad always talking about that movie. I don't really have anything to watch. I'm gonna throw caution to the wind and order this film. So I ordered the Blu-ray, watched it alone when I was absolutely miserable in college. That was a rough year. And I instantly fell in love with this movie. And it has just risen on this list every single time that I rewatch it. I think that it's fun. It's got some of the greatest action sequences ever. I love the whole plot with trying to take down these bank robbers that are supposedly going to be surfers, and Keanu Reeves and Gary Busey are heading up that front trying to find out who these guys are. All the while, you've got Patrick Swayze in my favorite role that he's ever done, and kind of this ragtag group of surfers that he's becoming friends with, and then, oh shit, turns out that they're the ones that he's been hunting the whole time. It's just a fantastic movie. Got remade unofficially into the Fast and the Furious, which turned out Fast 5, which was lower on this list. But Point Break for me is just, it's a perfect movie. It's a perfect experience. Whenever I'm in the mood for just a fun action movie that I can just kick back and just enjoy the thrills all the way to the end, few do it better than Point Break. Now the top 3, the holy trinity for me, and number 3 is Predator. This is the manliest, most testosterone-fueled piece of film that has ever been created. I mean, it's a movie that there's so much muscles in this fucking thing that I don't know if The Expendables or any other big macho franchise could ever come close to matching the level of testosterone that's on screen during Predator. But what I love about this movie is not just the huge muscles and the action stars and the macho testosterone side of things, which is great in 80s action movies. It's the villain, and it's the approach this movie takes of putting the machoest guys in the world in the woods with these huge-ass machine guns, and then you just throw in this extraterrestrial with a little bit of technology, and he just fucks them up the whole movie, and it just totally demasculates all these characters that you hold on this pedestal as the men of men. And at the heart of all that is Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the few Arnold Schwarzenegger-led movies that don't just feel like an Arnold vehicle. It feels like he's very much placed into the story and utilized as a character to make the Predator better and make the overall movie better, and not just be like, all right, Arnold, we're gonna put you in here doing macho shit and we're gonna call the movie this, like a lot of his vehicles are. Predator is a movie where Arnold is not the draw. The Predator is the draw. And I've talked about it ad nauseum. It was near the top of my 31 on 31 creature list. This movie is the shit. By far the best of the franchise, and we'll see what this new one's gonna do, but they haven't come close to matching the awesomeness that is Predator. And now you have the top two, and as much as all of you watching know exactly what number one is going to be, I will be honest with you, this is a very tight race for top two. Like, it's razor thin on how much I love these two movies. The Predator I love, but they don't come close to the top two here. And number two for me, one of my favorite films of all time, one of the most important movies of all time for me personally, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Not only one of the greatest action movies, not only one of the greatest sequels, not only one of the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, the best in my opinion, but one of the best movies, period, ever made. For as much of an awesome sequel that Cameron gave us with Aliens and just ramping everything up to 11, there has never been a sequel that has ramped everything up to the degree that Terminator 2 has and the level of perfection that it did it. This is a movie that flips the typical storyline of the Terminator on its head, puts Arnold in the protagonist role, gives you a smaller but more terrifying and badass villain in the T-1000. And when I talk about a movie that's just action set piece after action set piece after action set piece, this is the movie that I'm usually talking about, because the whole runtime, with the exception maybe, what, 20 minutes, is just huge scene with explosions and vehicles crashing and metal crunching all the way through to the finish. And it's just a perfect film. There is nothing that you could add or take away to this movie to make it better. I do like the director's cut, the little special edition, the extra scenes there, but the theatrical version is absolutely perfect even without that. So no matter what version of this movie you throw at me, it is a perfect experience every single time. It's a movie that was probably my favorite movie ever growing up. I watched it constantly, rewound that VHS tape on the daily. Terminator 2 is a perfect film, a perfect sequel, and a perfect action film, but it comes in at number two. Leaving number one, which, yes, most of you already know, is Die Hard. I've said it 1,000 times, this is my favorite film of all time, so of course it defaults to the top of this list, but you know what? It's not just because it's my favorite. This is a movie that oftentimes will top the best action movies list, because it is one of, if not the greatest action film ever made. It totally took what you thought an action hero should be in the 80s and revitalized all of that. You stick Bruce Willis, who at the time was an unknown name, he's not a big macho muscular guy, he's in good shape, but he's no Arnie, and you throw him into this huge larger-than-life situation where he's stuck in this high-rise tower full of terrorists and he has to save his wife, and from that movie forward, the action hero was reinvented. Now it's the regular guy with the foul mouth and who can just go into an everyday situation. That can be the action hero now, not just the dude who looks like he can break necks with a fucking finger. Die Hard, my God, what can I say that I haven't already said? This movie is just the perfect script. It's got the perfect villain in Hans Gruber. The John McClane as a character is probably my favorite movie character of all time. I love his humor. I love the way that he uses profanity. It's just, he's like my spirit animal. He really is. Great action sequences, brutal, gritty action sequences. Even just small things throughout the movie pay off in the end, like with Al Powell not really wanting to use his gun again, then he has to in the final frames. It's just, I love this movie with all of my heart. It's one that I have to watch every single year on Christmas. It's my favorite Christmas movie, my favorite action movie. Die Hard, I love you. Well, that's it, guys. That is my top 50 action movies. What are yours? Let me know down below. Please do not be an asshole down below. There's so many people, where's this movie? Where's this movie? On somebody else's list, bitch. If it wasn't here, it wasn't in my top 50. I don't know what to tell you. Put your top 50 down below so that I can look at your list and go, oh, different opinions. That's awesome. That's what's cool about me and movie fans. Let's do that down below. Let's have awesome discussions, not dickhead discussions that I gotta shut down. please like and share this video, hit that subscribe button. Be sure to go over to Brian Lomax's Movie Talk. The link will be in the description below. Check out his top 50 action movies. Probably going to be a lot more similar on this list than we were with comedies, but I'm sure he's going to have some surprises up his sleeve. Please check him out. As always, guys, thank you for watching, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.